Hi everybody, that's a very tough act to follow, thank you Caitlin. And I just want to say thanks so much to Philosopher's Yard for inviting me today. I live in Sheffield at the moment, but I'm from Birmingham, so it's really nice to have an excuse to come home. And it seems like a really fantastic thing that you're all doing for the city, so I just wish that I was here more so I could come to all your events. So thank you for inviting me to be part of it. My name is Natasha. I'm a lecturer in philosophy at the University of Leeds. I work at the Ethics Centre there, and I'm also one of the co-directors of the Centre for Love, Sex and Relationships. And I thought I would talk today about monogamy. It's a topic that's of kind of broad social interest at the moment. It's something that I've dipped in and out of over the last kind of 14 years. Research-wise, so I did my PhD on this topic, and I've recently started writing a book on it. So it's been kind of interesting picking it up again after 10 years or so, because there's been a real explosion in sort of news and in sort of popular articles, and also in philosophical literature on sort of polyamory and non-monogamous lifestyles. So the book that I'm trying to write very slowly is called Can We Make Sense of Monogamy? And I'm trying to kind of defend monogamy, but in a way that also allows room for people to have other kinds of relationships as well. So in this short talk, I'll just summarise really some of the kind of points of debate, I guess, in the philosophical writing around monogamy. And I'll just say a bit about why I think it's an interesting topic. And then I'll introduce the questions as well that we'll discuss in the breakout rooms. So, I think monogamy is philosophically puzzling. So it is something that many people struggle with. You get different figures depending on what study you look at, but most studies suggest that a lot of us have cheated on people before, right? It's very common. A lot of people as well kind of struggle with monogamy to the extent that they are turning away from monogamy. So 1 in 5 people now have tried a consensually non-monogamous relationship. Maybe between kind of 1 and 5% of people are in a polyamorous relationship at the moment. Again, depends where you look in terms of statistics. And some people, in philosophy at least, have been arguing that monogamy is immoral, right? That it's morally problematic because it involves restricting somebody of something, of things that are of value, right? Love and sex with other people. And not only are you doing that to somebody, you're doing it to somebody that you love, right? And normally when we love somebody, we want what's best for them, we want them to be happy, we want them to have good things in their life. But monogamy means that you say to that person, I will only love you if you completely restrict yourself of love and sex to me, and if you go against this restriction, I'm going to withdraw my love from you, I'm going to take myself away from you, and that could have huge consequences. You may have built a life together, you may have children together, you may have a house together, you may have been together for decades, but if that person kind of goes against monogamy, you will take all of that away from them, right? And we kind of sanction this and say that this is the right way to be, but there has been a kind of increased number of voices who are saying no, that's not okay actually, and people are also saying that it's irrational, right? So why do we ourselves enter into these monogamous arrangements where we agree to this very, very heavy restriction on us? But on the other hand, most people do desire to be in monogamous relationships, right? At least in kind of Western mainstream culture. And most people, many people at least, get a lot of value from these relationships, right? They really enjoy them and they feel fulfilled by them, right? They don't find them to be irrational, they don't find them to be immoral, they don't think that they're doing something really nasty to their partners, right? They don't feel like that when they're in these kind of relationships. These relationships feel good a lot of the time. So there's a sort of tension there between how we feel about monogamy and how we might look at it from a more abstract kind of way. but it's not entirely clear how we make sense of monogamy, right? So how it is that we kind of make sense of these different facets of it that are pulling us in different directions. So that's what I hope that we'll kind of think about today together, and we'll do some more discussion about it in the breakout room. So just to kind of clarify terms, so the term monogamy comes from the Greek monogamia, monos meaning single, gamia meaning marriage. Historically it would have meant one marriage for life. Now we use it much more broadly. It doesn't need to be a marriage in terms of how we kind of tend to use it, and it tends to refer to just one relationship, one romantic relationship at a time, and that's sexually exclusive. So it has the two aspects to it, kind of relationship exclusivity and sexual exclusivity. So you limit the number of partners you have to one, and you limit the you limit sex to that partner, right? And people now tend to be kind of serial monogamists. They have one partner after another, but it's only one partner at a time. But the first question that we'll consider when we're discussing this is, well, what does it exactly mean to be monogamous, right? Because there's quite a lot of room for disagreement there. So people, mostly agree that it means, well, you shouldn't have sex with other people, but there's quite a lot of grey areas around what that includes. Does it include watching porn? Does it include flirting? Does it include sexting? Does it include emotionally intimate relationships as well with other people? If you have very close friendships, could that mean that you're being non-monogamous? So what's included kind of in the set of things that's reasonable to restrict? And what about desire as well? So, we often feel hurt if our partner even desires to somebody else sexually or to be emotionally intimate with somebody else. But if somebody never has those kind of desires, then their monogamy is never tested, right? So it's like if somebody never has any desire for anybody else, it's actually very easy for them to be monogamous. Whereas if somebody has a lot of desire for other people but keeps a restraint on that desire and overcomes that desire, it's quite hard for them to be monogamous, right? So who should we give the most praise to? Like who's the good monogamist out of those people? When we're thinking about consensual non-monogamy, this term actually encompasses like a huge range of different kinds of relationships. I don't know if you can see this at the back, is it okay? Yeah, so I won't go through all of these relationships because this will take quite a while, but you can see from the graph that it's not just one thing. So you've got monogamy in the top left-hand corner, which is high sexual exclusivity and high emotional exclusivity, but all the rest of the relationships on that graph are non-monogamous, right? And so within polyamory, some of the kind of forms of polyamory that get discussed are polyfidelity, which means a kind of group of people, so maybe a throuple of 4 people who are all in a relationship together, a romantic and sexual relationship together, but they're exclusive within that relationship, so it's sometimes called a polycule. And actually, among polyamorous people, that form of polyamory is kind of less common, but it's quite often discussed. Perhaps more common is hierarchical polyamory, where you have primary partner, and then you may have secondary partners and maybe tertiary partners, and the difference is how much priority you give people. So you might give your primary partner more time, you might live with them. If you go to hospital, they'll probably be the first person you call. If they're busy, you'll go to your secondary partners. So there's a kind of clear hierarchy there of priority. We've also got non-hierarchical polyamory, sometimes called kind of network relationships, where people are just, they don't prioritise people in that way, but they're kind of just a sort of network of romantic relationships. And then in the far corner over here, you've got relationship anarchy. So relationship anarchists don't agree that we should categorise our relationships as romantic relationships and friendships at all. So they think that instead every relationship is unique and we should take them on their own terms. And they really do eschew any kind of exclusivity. So they they object to the term consensual non-monogamy because they don't think that you should have to give your consent for your partner to sleep with other people, right? They think the only people who should give consent are the people who are about to have sex, right? We shouldn't have any power over each other to stop other people from doing what they want. So they would oppose polyfidelity, they'd oppose hierarchical, they oppose putting your relationships in hierarchies as well, so they'd oppose hierarchical polyamory. Right, so that just gives a flavour of kind of the different sorts of consensually non-monogamous relationships we might have. Now, the question at the start that started with was, can we make sense of monogamy? So when we ask that question, people sometimes respond with a couple of kinds of answers. So one is a sort of evolutionary account. People might say, well, look, we've just evolved to be pair bonding species, right? It's in our nature to be monogamous. That's why we're monogamous. Or people might appeal to history, right? They might appeal to kind of religious teachings or to tradition and say, look, we've always been monogamous. It's just kind of our culture or our tradition or our religion. And sometimes people point to property as well and say, well, we only became monogamous when we started owning private property, and it became important for men to know that they could pass their private property on to their children, so they needed to know their partners were faithful to them. Right, there are problems with these kind of arguments, right, particularly the evolutionary account, because you can find compelling evidence on both sides to argue for what you want to say. Non-monogamists say, look at all this compelling evidence to show that we've evolved to be non-monogamous, and monogamists say, look at all this evidence to show that we've evolved to be monogamous. And similarly with history, not all religions are monogamous, not all traditions are monogamous, not all cultures are monogamous across the world. So that's kind of culturally contingent. The property example may be true, I say may be true, but in any case, none of these kinds of arguments kind of justify monogamy, right? So they might tell us a causal story for why we're monogamous, but they don't tell us why we should continue to be monogamous, right? And we do think that we should go against our nature and our cultures and our traditions sometimes when we think that there's a better way to live. So what I'm more interested in is, can we justify monogamy, right? Can we explain rationally why it's a good way for us to live, like why it's a good thing to do? Can we give a compelling account of that? And you might respond by saying, well, why should I have to justify monogamy? Like, it's my choice how I live my life, what kinds of relationships I have, it's nobody else's business. But we do sometimes think that we should justify our relationship choices, and we do sometimes think that we should intervene in other people's relationship choices when they're problematic. Right, so a philosopher called Harry Chalmers, who wrote a paper called Is Monogamy Morally Permissible, a few years ago, invites us to consider this example. So he says, imagine that two partners are in a romantic relationship, yet theirs is not a typical relationship. For the partners have agreed on a most unusual restriction. Neither is allowed to have additional friends. Should either partner become friends with someone besides the other partner will refuse to support it. Indeed, will go so far as to withdraw her love, affection, and willingness to continue the relationship. Right, you can probably see where Chalmers is going with this. So he says, look, most of us would think this was quite a morally troubling relationship, quite disturbing. If it was your friend, you might think, no, I should intervene there and tell them that's not a good thing that you should be getting into. But Chalmers says, well, why is that? Well, is it because friendship is a sort of valuable human good that we should all have in our lives? Well, yes. But then he says, well, that sexual relationships and romantic and intimate relationships are also valuable human goods. And some people will get lots of value from having more than one of those in their lives. So if we think there's a problem here, why don't we think there's a problem in the monogamy case? So this is the second question. Is it okay to restrict your partner from having friends? Because some people do just say, well, there's nothing wrong with that case. So we'll discuss that. And is it okay to restrict them from living in sexual relationships with others? If there's a difference in your answer to those two questions, what is the difference? And kind of thinking about that difference really does get us to the heart of trying to make sense of monogamy, really, thinking about how we justify the decision to be monogamous. So one way that we might go is to look at jealousy, right? So this is where people's gut reaction to non-monogamy is often, well, we can't do it because we're too jealous, right? Or I'm too jealous, right? When people often say sort of people are naturally sexually jealous, so it would be too painful for them to think of their partner having sex with other people or being emotionally intimate with other people. So therefore we have to be monogamous to kind of prevent us from feeling this really painful emotion, which is jealousy. The problem with that kind of response, though, is that there are other instances in life where we do think we have some responsibility to deal with our jealousy. So going back to the friendship case, if you're jealous of your partner for having other friends, or if you're jealous when your friend has other friends that they're closer to than you, we think that's a you problem, right? We think you should deal with your jealousy. We don't think your friend should stop having other friends, or your partner should stop having other friends. So there are cases where jealousy isn't so socially sanctioned, and we think that we have a responsibility to deal with it. Also, it's not true that it's impossible to deal with our jealousy, right? Polyamorous people try to cultivate compassion, a feeling of joy when their partner is with other people, sexually or romantically. So if some people can do it, and we do in some cases think we're responsible for our jealousy, then why should we sort of sanction, then why in a monogamy case do we say, well, if you're jealous of your partner having sex with other people, that's a them problem and they need to stop doing that, rather than saying it's a you problem and you need to deal with your jealousy. So, question, are we too accepting of sexual jealousy? Should we work harder to overcome it? Another way that we might justify monogamy is through thinking about practicality. So we might just say, well, look, we are pulled in so many different directions, we're so busy, we just don't have time to have several relationships at a time, right? We only have time to have one. And this might resonate with some people, it definitely resonates with me. I'm seeing quite a few nods around the room. And there have been a couple of quite popular articles that have come out recently, one in the Atlantic, one in the New York Times, that said polyamory is only for rich people, right? Because you need to have the time, you need to have the resources to pay for babysitters and pay for hotel rooms and dates, and you might need to sort of be in a job that gives you enough free time in order to be able to have all these multiple relationships. But again, this isn't a fully satisfying justification, because we do tend to think that it's possible to have lots of good relationships in our life, whether those are friendships, sibling relationships, children, other sort of familial relationships. And so if we think that it is practical to have those kind of relationships and many of those, then what is it about romantic and sexual relationships that means that we think we can only manage one? Fourth question, why might we think it would be impractical to have several romantic partners but not have several friends or several children or several siblings? So I don't have time to go into a lot of other possible justifications for monogamy, but just to mention a few. Children might be one, right? So we might think that it's just better for children to be raised in monogamous relationships rather than polyamorous relationships, so we can discuss that more in the breakout room. Secondly, security, right? So we might think that monogamous relationships are the best way to provide us with attachment security and kind of emotional security that enables us to flourish and go out into the world and do scary things. And then validation might be another one as well. So we might think we get an enormous amount of validation from being with just one partner who's chosen us over literally everybody else in the world to be with us. Right? You might think that's a sort of problematic desire to have, that we shouldn't have that kind of desire, but we can discuss that more shortly. And there are others as well, so we will discuss those shortly. So the last and final question is just, what is the best way to make sense of of monogamy, and I look forward to discussing that with you in the breakout room. Thank you very much.